Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. This month's theme is "It's Okay to Fall." I recently read a concept that if you to forget the favors you have given to your neighbors, but always remember the people who have helped you along the way. I find that concept a little bit more inviting. A lot of times we could get a little bit heady of what has actually happened in our lives and who has actually helped us in our lives. I can only speak from my experience, but I asked this question, obviously working in the mental health field. I asked this question recently, but more often is, am I allowed to get better? It's a concept that's kind of a little bit more intriguing. You could go as deep as you like, as deep as you can at this moment, but at the same time, I do find it easy. I try to encourage not only my clients, but also myself to dig a little deeper, find ways to kind of navigate what you're going through. I think this concept, and before we bring in our new guest, this concept just reminds us that we're human beings. We're messy and beautiful at the same time. We feel worthless at the same time as we feel accomplished. So it is a little tricky. But today, as we continue, as we talk, as we venture into this "It's Okay to Fall" theme, I have a new guest. Her name is Kiera Smith. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you so much for coming on.
That's right.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
No problem. I want to give a disclaimer. If you are experiencing any crisis situation, life-threatening situations that you feel unsafe, in the States it's 988. Do you know what it is in the UK at all, by chance? If you are experiencing the hotline?
Yeah. There's a charity called the Samaritans in the UK who have a 24-hour contact line. So I haven't got the number to hand, but the Samaritans are the people that are there for you if you need to talk at any point.
And those who are listening, I'll put that in the notes. So if you are in the UK and you're trying to find some help, I encourage wherever you are in the world to find what resources are there that will work for you. It's one of the notable things I like to ask. I always encourage people is whether it's a friend, a colleague, anyone that you can actually say these three words, "I need help." I encourage you to go to them and ask and say that. I'll give you a few included to the UK. In Argentina, 911, Suicide Hotline is 135. South Korea is 112, and the Suicide Hotline is 02-715-8600. Again, thank you so much for coming on, Keira, and just being part of the conversation, really. I always say that people say it better than me, and we'll just dive in if that's okay with you.
Yeah, of course.
I think of Albert Einstein, and he says it this way: "It's not that I'm so smart, it's just that I stay with problems longer." It's kind of simple and eloquent, but what comes to mind when you hear this quote, and anything else you want to add?
Yeah, it actually links in really, really well, Robert, to the work that I do. I'm a solution-focused hypnotherapist, and I help people make a meaningful life, who want to make a meaningful life change, but I help them unlock immediate progress towards that with science-based behavioral therapy. And going back to that quote about Albert Einstein, I stay with problems for longer. What we do for clients is we allow them, give them permission to start small, so maybe you will be with that problem for longer, but you'll be making those constant small steps in that right direction. So actually, a massive problem. Sometimes we feel we need to do something huge to solve a big problem, but actually it's the opposite. We need to think very, very small to start us on that journey. For example, a client of mine said to me that if she hadn't have come for sessions with me, she was feeling so dreadful, she would have ended up moving back to Romania, where she'd moved from, to England, and that would have been completely wrong for her, because she was so desperate to do something that she would have made too large a decision. So that's where I really come in on that, is we give people permission to start really small, really tiny.
Yeah, and one of the things that I feel allows us to get there is just giving ourselves the time to notice these problems. I think the most dangerous problems are the ones we don't notice, the ones that we urgently I'll just get better. A lot of things don't get better organically, like we like to assume, or forced.
Absolutely.
And I think problem solving in essence is creative in nature. We're complex individuals with different contexts, different backgrounds, and at least for me, I haven't found it work personally well for myself or even for my clients to take out the context of who I am. That makes no so if I am upset about XYZ, even though other people looking on the sheet, on the top sheet of the paper, like, oh, that's not a big deal, but it is a big deal for me.
Exactly. So, we are all so different, and in the work that I do, we don't give advice. I don't tell people what to do. I ask the right questions. It's all solution focused, so it's all about what do you want and how can we get there, and we back away from the problem. So we use something in our sessions called the miracle question, which we ask clients, if you were 1 point up on that scale, you're feeling a 7 today, if you were an 8, what would that feel like? And if they say, for instance, I'll be getting up earlier in the morning, we work around that. Okay, how can we make that happen? It's not just setting your alarm and hoping that you'll get up that morning. It's back away from that. What will I need to do the night before to help that to happen? How can I make my life a little bit easier so I can start chipping away at the things that, like you said, Robert, matter to that person, not what matters to other people or onlookers. What's important to you, and how does that look for you?
And it gets tricky. And I can imagine you, especially because it's tied to the individual. So even people close to the individual, family, loved ones, sometimes, unfortunately, can be the barriers. And it's not because they're wrong or they don't want the best for that individual, but it's their version of what that best thing is.
Absolutely.
So it's one of the things that gets, I guess, stripped sometimes, unfortunately, is, let's say, me having a mental health diagnosis. Eventually, the idea is that I'm going to find out what's next for me, in that regards, having that diagnosis. But however, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a popular solution. It doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to feel very comfortable, especially if someone's been mentally ill for several years or decades, and the families are like, well, this is what we're comfortable in, but the what next doesn't get tackled because the person's identity or humanity becomes kind of like on the ground floor.
Absolutely. Other people won't necessarily like you getting better because, like you say, you're not the, you become more confident, you become more capable, and that's not necessarily like you say, it's not necessarily comfortable for them. So you're completely right. It's something that comes up a lot with my clients where, I begin all my sessions, solution focused hypnotherapy begins all their sessions with talking about what's been good. We want to know what's been good, what's been different, because this stimulates serotonin in the brain. It gets you in the intellectual part of the brain. And as they talk about that, often those things come up, Robert, that, oh, well, actually, I've become more of an advocate for myself. And I'm noticing people don't necessarily love that. However, I'm feeling confident enough now. I'm confident enough to say, okay, you're not okay with that, but my brain's feeling good now, so I'm going to carry on with this. But you are totally right. It can be one of the biggest barriers. The people that love us the most can be one of the biggest barriers.
Well, I just think there's a lot of the level of certainty that we can't gain from any, especially when someone's going through something like this, is kind of sometimes jarring. A lot of times, it's the holistic approach. We kind of say everything, whatever works for the individual, building hobbies, building community. A lot of times, community is not there, so the person could be having the best, treatment, whatever that is. They could have family that's supportive, but no community, and then they feel empty. They don't feel like part of anything.
Absolutely. And also, when you're feeling mentally unwell, we can isolate ourselves because it feels safer, or we're just not feeling like we want to connect, even though that would be great for us. We just we're not in that. We could become. I know lots of clients that I've seen say, I've isolated myself. That's why I need help, because I've cut myself off from people.
And unfortunately, it's understandable, but a lot of times it doesn't help the situation, because eventually, all of us need community. I think Mark Twain says it this way: the worst loneliness is not to be comfortable with yourself. I think that is very, very true. So,
and looking at that from a science, looking at that from a science-based perspective, Robert, that's our fight-flight brain trying to keep us safe. And that's kind of the bedrock of what we do in our sessions, is educate clients about that, so that they can understand at that point, this is not real fear. This is my primitive fight-flight brain just trying to keep me away from people where it might be dangerous or the situation could be risky. And once people know that, that's really helpful for them, because they think, oh, okay, this is just my primitive brain. I can still do this because I'm not in danger.
Yeah, no, sometimes it does help, not for everyone, but just to establish a baseline of some ways to relax. Because relaxation, things like whatever that looks like. If you're go, some people do full-on meditation. Some people just do mindfulness. Some people do a bit of both. Some people do progressive relaxation. A lot of these things are helpful to kind of get. And I always kind of tell my clients, don't do it when you're about to have when you're having a crisis. Do it as a regular thing, so you can kind of build that. You're familiar with the relaxation response, and you may be able to remember what you're
sharing. You're training your brain. So as soon as my clients come to me, the first two things they're given. The first is my hypnotherapy relaxation, my trance, which lasts about 23, 24 minutes. So like you said, Robert, they're asked to listen to that every single night as they're going to sleep, because it begins to train the brain. It tells the brain it's safe. And like you say, it's something to use all the time, especially at the beginning when they come to me, because you're showing the brain, exactly as you say, how to relax. And then the other tool that they're given, and I always say to them, without you doing these things, this isn't going to work. So the other thing I ask them to do is every single day in a notepad, write down what's been good, because again, you're retraining that brain. And these are two tools that, I have clients who might come back to me every 6 months for a top up, and they'll say, I've been having a rough time. I've gone back to my what's been good and listening to my trance relaxation. So it's those two solid tools that are science-based that they can go back to And then if there are other things that work around that, that's brilliant, but it gives them a starting point to get into that relaxation and feeling better.
Going back to like problem solving, I skimmed through this. I remember there was a question I wanted to ask you. What have you seen or experienced personally that helped, I guess, the clients you're working with, maybe even yourself or people around you, stay resilient when you're facing so much, this negative response, when you're facing these kind of barriers that at the time maybe you don't have the insight, and insight alone doesn't mean change. So what have you seen helped? And
it's absolutely it's the solution focused hypnotherapy. It's what I do as a job. So I have spent a lot of money and time on a lot of things which haven't got me anywhere, and my mental health got worse and worse because I had a very abusive childhood, had lots of traumatic events happen to me. So for me, for my friends, for my clients, it is those tools, and the type of therapy that I do, I always say to my clients, it becomes your life, it becomes your lifestyle, because people don't need to come to me for years and years and years. They come for maybe 6 sessions, and during those 6 sessions, they've put together, so they have those 2 tools I was talking about, and then on top of that, they start to notice what helps them. So it might be like, say, meditation. It could be for one client, it is making sure that for every hour she works, she's a dental nurse, that she goes out to the toilet for 5 minutes. And that ensures that her day flows well because her brain can recover. So it's finding those tools, building from those 2 tools, finding out what works for you, and continuing to build on that. So the basis of what I do is education. So once people know about that intellectual brain where we make the good decisions from, primitive brain where we experience anxiety, anger, and depression, once they know that there are 2 parts of the brain, they can start to notice when they're moving towards one or when they're moving towards the other. And the other key thing, which really, really helps at those times when you're wanting to be more resilient, is something really fundamental, which is called the stress bucket. This is the big thing that my clients latch onto from the beginning. Imagine you've got a bucket in your head, and every stressful thing, whether that's negative thoughts, whether that's trauma, grief, everything goes in that bucket. That bucket has to get emptied. In order for us to empty that bucket, we do not need to talk about the problem. What we need to do is start limiting what's going in it and get your sleep to a good quality. So when we have that REM sleep at night, that rapid eye movement sleep, that is emptying that stress bucket out for us. That is moving those memories from the fight flight brain into the intellectual brain, and then we get emotional distance from it. Once my clients know that, they're like, that's simple. That's imagining a bucket, imagining what's going in it, and then they can start to notice, that would have gone in my stress bucket before, but I've not put it in there because I've taken an action to make sure it doesn't go in. So those 3 pieces of information, the intellectual brain, good, primitive brain, not so good, and stress bucket, are what really helps them start to take control, especially at those times when resilience is really, really needed.
I when you're sharing all this, it struck me as just how much of a participant the client is in this whole process. Absolutely. I know that, the obviously, I know just from experience and also from that, it, no matter how great, I guess the plan or the treatment or whatever, if the person's not in it, it's not going to work. I know that's an old saying, but the involvement the involvement is so important. I feel, unfortunately, sometimes that gets skipped over, unfortunately. Obviously we try not to. Certain circumstances I guess in crisis situations, but a lot of times those are kind of, they have certain parameters, but the problem I get is the gray area. They're out of the hospital. They're back in the community. They're trying to find out, they're trying to pick up the pieces. The what's next is a lot of times when mental health gets dropped, because the what's next is,
Totally. Yeah. Actually, it's a big thing. A client said to me, she was like, I was sent home from work because I had a meltdown. I couldn't cope. But then she was like, what do I do now? I don't want to go on medication. The doctor had offered her to go on a very, very long waiting list. And it goes back to that client participation, like you said, of, okay, I've got to do something now. And that has changed her life, because her very words to me were, you've taught me that I have a choice. And it doesn't have to be big things that I do, but I have a choice, and I have a choice about what I keep in my life, what I put in, what I take out, and I have I can choose. But you're totally right. And sometimes I'll have clients come to me and I'll know straight away, this isn't going to work, because they want me to do it for them. However, having said that, I'm only asking for half an hour of their time every day, and 24 minutes of that is lying down with their eyes closed, listening to a relaxation zone. It just takes 5 minutes to do the other bit, but it's essential, Robert. And to change their own life, then taking on that responsibility and it can be ever so hard, but the people who do it, the reward and the feedback I get is just wonderful, amazing.
It also reminded me when I was in the military during 9/11. I was in the Air Force, and I just remember sometimes whatever, when a group of people are given, I don't know, a large task, or everyone's pretty stressed, I always find working a problem helps. Like, no matter what's going on, I'm with my other airmen, where we have, I felt like I laugh and saying this. I felt like Chewbacca, because I was in the Air Force and we never had enough parts with unrealistic deadlines. But I just remember, for me, just sometimes just working the problem, and I find that even more so now, working in the mental health field, working the problem with the client, one at a time. There's so much urgency in the world. Let's see what we can do. And I do encourage. I do appreciate your side of that. And since we're talking about what you're doing, I always like to give an opportunity for those new guests, returning guests, to just share a little bit of themselves that you're comfortable with. And the floor is yours right now, so go ahead.
Thank you. Well, 5 years ago, I would have never imagined I would have found something that would enable me to actually get better and actually become the person that I wanted to be. Because, as I mentioned, I'd grown up in an abusive home, domestic violence, alcoholism, which immediately you're just constantly in that fight flight part of your brain. And then when I was 11, I had brain surgery for a brain tumor, which left me visually impaired. And kind of going forward from that, then more family troubles. I lost my mum. I had an abusive relationship of my own. So by the time I reached my mid-30s, I just couldn't cope anymore. And I always say to my clients that how much I empathize with them, because I've walked this walk because I had to save my own life. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for solution-focused hypnotherapy. I wouldn't be here. And it's been amazing to do something that, as I was learning to do it, I was able to get well myself, and I just continue to get more and more and more well, because I learn more and more and more what works for me, what doesn't work for me. I can support my partner better. He's found out he has ADHD, and I can support him better. It's just been an amazing journey, Robert, that I just I feel incredibly lucky to have come across this form of therapy. I've spent so much money and so much time. I was at a point where I was just exercising like a maniac. I had food allergies. I was so tired and exhausted all the time. I'd had shingles twice. I just was at the end. God knows where I'd be now. But in my journey of helping myself and training to do this form of therapy, my friends were my guinea pigs, and I've helped them, and we've, got closer and closer as friends. And then the clients that have come to see me, I feel so lucky. I feel so lucky. It's been amazing, because sometimes I have people come into my clinic room, and when I explain to them, after this initial consultation, we're not going to be talking about the past. We're not going to be talking about the problem. We're going to be talking about the solution. Sometimes they cry with joy, because they say, I have spent so many years talking through my trauma that I am so relieved to have found you. And I explained to them, if we keep talking about that trauma, it keeps going back in the stress bucket, and we keep having to reprocess those memories. And they're so relieved. And that's me in a nutshell, really. I used to be a personal trainer, and then I wanted a career change, and this kind of fell in my lap. So it was kind of meant to be.
Funny enough, not in the same way, but I would say going into the mental health field like I did, helping people became my healing. It was that kind of thing. I was literally going to, we have community kind of drop-in centers. I did groups just randomly. I never did them before. I did support groups, and for me it was more I would say a reminder. We're horrible human beings at remembering anything. I think that plays a part of me continuing to be able. I have to be mindful of the barriers and boundaries, and I can't save everyone. I can't help everyone. However, it's humbling. It's humbling to have the access to help what I can and do what I can. And
it really is, isn't it? It's an honor. It's a privilege.
And I just want to say thank you for what you do. And those who are listening, watching, all the links and everything to find out more will be below. Just click away and you'll find out more about what Keira is doing. And if it's something that is interest, I would encourage to find out. Well, for me, it's whatever helps. Whatever helps. I did.
Absolutely.
I remember, because I'm half South Korean, half Puerto Rican, so I'm just confused.
Oh, fantastic! What a great combination! What a lovely heritage.
And I just remember I did acupuncture a few times, and I did. I drank a deer horn. It was like this. It tasted special, but it was very. I'll say it that way. But for me, I did everything and anything to help where I was at that time. So there's this one word. My wife has these untranslatable words. It's Welsh, actually. It's harath. And it says, a homesickness for somewhere you cannot return to, the nostalgia and grief of a lost place of your past, places that never were at times. So it's kind of, I don't know what to call this, but I think sometimes we get stuck here, especially when when I'm struggling with mental illness and you're stuck, you don't know, you're just hoping it'll get better. Unfortunately, I don't know how your experience was, but I just know the more I try to get people try to explain what was going on with me, how exhausting that was, because no one will ever understand what I'm going through. And the other thing was, it was never, you feeling never heard. So I shifted the external validation for being part of the community to the internal one, and choosing the one. And it still is a process. It's not an easy one, but I would say it's definitely better than needing to have validation to be a part of a group or people.
100%. You're absolutely correct, Robert. And in this world at the moment, the very opposite is being constantly shoved in your face with social media and things. And I mean, my clients, it's a bit like going to the gym and strengthening your body and your muscles. You know, with the work that we do, we strengthen their brain, and the stronger your brain gets and the more you're in that intellectual part of your brain, the easier it gets to do what you've just said. You know, actually, this is for me. This is what's best for me. I don't really care what that person's doing. And it's this process, like you say, it doesn't happen overnight. Slowly, they're chipping away at that kind of external world and bringing it back to the inside. A client of mine said to me, he said, you can read all the self-help books you want, but unless you have a starting point and a place to actually start working from, they're just words. They're just useless. So
they are, you know, and like you could gain a lot of insight, but if there's no movement, there's nothing.
Absolutely.
I would say, when, you know, the question that I said in the beginning, are we allowed to get better? And a lot of times there's this whole push about stress being bad, but there is healthy stress. Let me just tell you, there's healthy stress.
Yeah.
And I do not want to have no stress, because if I have no stress, and I'll say it this way, because then I wouldn't get out of bed. Then I won't have no purpose to do anything.
We need a bit of adrenaline to keep us living, you know, and keep us going to the fridge and getting food and
exactly.
You know,
so like
absolutely.
these you know, so the idea of not having stress it's not really the question. The question is, how do I manage stress to accomplish what I want to do in this parameters? And a lot of times it means that it'll be uncomfortable. I felt like if you just you're physical, you may understand this more with being a physical trainer. There's gonna be a bit of, in the military we call embrace the suck. There's gonna be
absolutely.
You cannot avoid the suck to like get where you want to go. But it's a reminder that, you know, as things get difficult, it shows for me, especially from my journeys, is that the more I put myself in circumstances that may produce some stress, but I have a goal, and even if it doesn't work out, it shows that I put value in the time and what I do for me to get myself better. And that stress is what I think is important for us to not abandon for wherever we're at.
Yeah, it's noticing the difference between motivational stress and, you know, unpleasant, nasty, persistent, niggling stress that's making you, you know, and some people, this has brought me to a really good point, actually. A lot of people who come to me, if you were to say to them, are you stressed? They would say, no, I'm not stressed. So, you know, I'd say, okay, hi, blah, blah, blah. What would you like support with? Well, I'm fine, but I grind my teeth at night. Or, oh yeah, everything's fine, but my back hurts all the time. I get migraines. So people, you know, don't always recognize that stress either. They don't always recognize that as stress. So, you know, I never diagnose. I never tell people what's wrong with them. I work with what's in the room. I follow the process, and then as they go along, they will generally say, "I've realised now. I know about my brain and stuff. I was really stressed, wasn't I? But actually, they're working through it, and they're working through that stress bucket, and they're starting to notice then what stresses them, and that, like you say, when it's okay stress and it's good stress and it's motivating them, or if it's, oh no, I'm tipping into the kind of bad, nasty end of the stress, and they start to be more aware then of, this is good, this is pushing me, this is bad, this is holding me back, this is stress that holds me back. So there's a really lovely quote from researcher and storyteller Brené Brown, who I absolutely love, and she says, choose discomfort over resentment. So it's those little moments where, like you were saying, you know that you need that bit of stress to, I've got to go forward at this point. And then that, you know, that it's those moments when you need to say no to someone, or you need to tell them, I can't do that. And you know that it's a little bit uncomfortable in that moment, but it's lets you off the hook from so much kind of resentment and that bad niggly stress that just bubbles away under the surface.
Yeah, and the question sometimes, I'm working with someone and I ask the question, are you allowed to get better? And then the question, and then maybe there's barriers within the conversation I'm having. And I get to the point sometimes, I'm like, it hasn't worked. It hasn't worked. So sometimes we go these cycles and it's hard for us to see. And sometimes we read books and self-help books. Sometimes we have blanket generalized statements. I see this pervasive. I've been a church leader before, and I see it's complicated in churches, extremely, because there's avoidance of dealing with anything straight on. But at the same time, you get all this information. You maybe, but I love this quote. It says, "A ship is in the harbor is safe, but that's not what a ship are built for." So it's like eventually, as we go through healing and recovery, the idea is that you're going to go on your ship. So is that your ship, or is that someone else's ship that you're trying to ride? So it's kind of understanding that. So.
Absolutely, and kind of linking that really nice quote back to that primitive brain that I've talked about, that fight flight brain, where that will try and keep you in harbor, that will try and keep that ship there because it's trying to keep you safe. We've had it since we were cave people, so it's now sees any bit of anxiety as what they would have seen as like a man with a spear or a polar bear or whatever it would have been then. And that primitive brain wants to keep you there, and the higher your anxiety levels are, the more that brain kicks in and tries to keep you away from dangerous situations as it sees them. But as I said, once my clients know about that primitive brain, and simply by taking these actions, half an hour a day, reducing that anxiety, that confidence starts to just edge forward a little bit. And something we always talk about is control is constant. So let's get in control of that little bit. Let's move that ship just to the mouth of the bay. And let's wait there for a bit. Let's get comfortable there. And then we'll move forward a little bit more. So this week it might just be what's your next action going to be this week? It's going to be I'm going to do a 10-minute walk around the block. Okay, that's great. And then they've mastered that, and then it's the next bit, and it's taking those tiny steps so that ship can edge out of that harbor and start to sail. But it happens steadily. It's
been wonderful to have you on. I want to kind of, as we wrap up, it's okay to fall as a theme. And like, I had this theme for a couple years just because obviously it's kind of punny, we're in fall, but also it is one of those things. Is it okay to fail? Is it okay to go through hardship? Does this mean that I am lost? Am I is it a permanence when it comes to that, or is there some ways to look at it differently? A lot of times we have this either or attitude, Anakin Skywalker in Star Wars, you're either with me or against me attitude, or there might be a third option. You might want to just take care of yourself. So what do you think is important for us to remember as we try to navigate through our failures, as human beings, whether you have mental health issues or anything, behavioral issues, whatever, new health discoveries that you didn't have before, life changes? What would you like to share with those listening?
Yeah, it's and it absolutely is okay to fall, because we all fall. We either win or we learn, as my business coach says. We either win or we learn. And I think the really, really big thing, something that I find incredibly helpful, and I know that clients develop this as they go along with me, is seeing meaning or purpose in those failures or fallings, or what can I learn from this? As awful as it is, and I've been in some god awful, horrific situations, where is this pointing me? Where is, what can I take from this? There's an amazing book by Viktor Frankl called Man's Search for Meaning. He survived 4 concentration camps, and his ability to constantly look for the meaning in what he's doing. He believes, that it brought him to his purpose, which was to help others find their purpose. And that for me is the biggest thing when I've fallen, is that purpose, that meaning.
I think, well said. I think if we allow ourselves the ability to grow, we think about failures, we think about where we've been and where we would like to go. One of my friends, I thought was very eloquent. We think about books, and books are either finished or unfinished, but our book is never really unfinished, not to be bleak, until we pass away at the end. So if everything in your life right now is unfinished, it may give you the kind of pliability, allow yourself to explore new options, because the urgency and the kind of find an easy way to do things quickly kind of way, it doesn't really work, because the thing is, life is best, in essence, best lived when you're part of it, when you're not on the passenger side, when you're and so, like, if you're, I think this is a funny thing about humanity, because there's meaning behind everything. So a father has his artwork in his desk, and it looks like it looks horrible, but he says it's the most precious thing, because it's his son's artwork at like whatever age it is. So we put meaning and care and value in people, and I think sometimes if we remember that we are also people who are going through things, we may be able to put value into our time, because if we don't value ourselves, we won't value the time or put the time to get where we may need to go in that journey.
You're absolutely right. Time is the most precious thing we have, and how we spend it is, there's I don't know if you've heard of A Diary of a CEO, that we have the podcast of, Stephen Bartlett, his name is. He said, imagine if you had to pay to go and see the appointments you have in your diary, the friends that you've lined up to see. Imagine if you had to pay to go and see them. Who would you pay to go and see, and what would you pay money to go and do? And that puts things into very sharp focus of, oh my God, no, I wouldn't, or oh my God, yes, I would, because I love this person or this opportunity. Exactly. So that's something else that is a real big thing for me, is that.
Again, thank you so much. Any little final thoughts you want to mention before we wrap up here?
Just really, if you're somebody who has tried all sorts of stuff, and you are looking for something fresh and different, and you would like the chance in just 6 weeks to work with me and make a significant life change for yourself, then please get in touch. Even if it's just for a chat, to find out some more information. I work online and in person, so I can work with anyone, anywhere in the world. And if you head to my website, which you'll be popping in the show notes, I'm sure, Robert.
Yes.
There is my hypnotherapy relaxation is on there. So, you can head there and you can start listening to that just as you're going to sleep at night. And that will be the very, very start of your journey into feeling better and having much better mental health.
Thank you again, Kiera, for coming on. It's been great. I just want to share with those who are listening to stay updated with Revive Ministries. The platform ReviveMinistriesFL.com is our website. Leaving with the last quote from M. Scott Peck. He says, "Until you value yourself, you won't value your time. Until you value your time, you will not do anything with it."
Couldn't agree more.